Is it worth buying in the Philippines in 2025 and beyond? Yes or no? That's what we'll be answering today. Welcome to the very first episode of Financial Freedom Philippines. Our mission is to empower Filipinos to build wealth and a brighter future. We are driven by a deep love for the Philippines and a vision of seeing the country and its people flourish. My name is Kane, and joining me today are my amazing co hosts, Georgina and Justin. Say hello, you guys.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. All right. And together, we've spent years diving deep into the world of real estate, finance, and banking to equip you with the insights, strategies, and inspiration you need to make smart, informed decisions on your investment journey. We're excited to kick things off with a question that's on a lot of minds lately. Is it worth buying property in the Philippines? So, Justin, why don't you tell us why are we doing this episode?
So, the reason why we're doing this episode is because we're seeing very fast growing trends
Mm,
of people who are born overseas come back here to the Philippines. So, people who are born in the US, UK, Australia, there's Western nations where one cost of living is skyrocketing, so it's really hard to live the lifestyle they want. And then number two, those places are, if they're not already, becoming renters nation, so meaning it's basically impossible for an average salary to save up for a deposit and buy a home. And that's even in Australia where they help people buy homes, right? The government gives
mm.
people percentage of the deposit to buy a home, and even they're struggling. So, those second generation, third generation Filipinos are going, where can I go to get into the real estate game,
Mm.
but more than likely to get the lifestyle that they want, and they're looking at the Philippines. So that's what's inspired us.
Absolutely. There's a lot of reasons why people are considering moving back to the Philippines, buying here for the first time, and investing. And so, because there's so many reasons, we're actually going to be splitting this episode into two episodes. So, this episode's going to be very profit based, it's going to be very informative, lots of facts and figures. And then in the next episode, we're going to be focusing on the more emotional, the more personal reasons why people actually want to live here.
Sounds
Great.
so exciting.
I'm really excited to get
I
into this
wanna,
with you
I
guys.
I wanna make money.
Yes,
Who doesn't want to make money, right? All
exactly.
right. So Justin, go
Just one
ahead.
thing, I just want to explain to people before we get started, right? That this episode is an overview of the Philippines as a whole.
Mm,
So that means that if you're going to do your due diligence, this is only level one. There are a lot more levels and a lot more things that you need to research. So you want to go granular if you want to be doing your due diligence as a property investor. So you want to be checking out the cities, the suburb, the building itself, other locations around it. So make sure that when you're listening to this episode, you're not taking it as this is like Philippines is it. You should be also going a lot more granular. And you should use this episode as a inspiration to be like, oh, Philippines is really doing well compared to other places. Let me do my research and let me look into what these guys are saying.
right. Yeah. The key here is to do your homework, you guys. Do
Yes.
your homework. All right. Okay. Let's get started with our very first topic. Reason number one, the rapid economic growth in the Philippines. So, a lot of people might be wondering, why should I care? Right? Why should I care if there's economic growth, if I'm investing in properties here in the country? Here's why: a strong economy boosts or it equals to consumer confidence. This translates to more people getting ready to spend, getting ready to buy. So when people feel secure in their income and how much they make and their jobs and their careers, the demand for properties, for the demand to buy homes, to buy offices, right, for investors, to buy commercial spaces, it goes up, right? It surges. So in other words, the economic growth has a direct impact on the real estate market. And so an economic boom also draws in foreign investors. So this includes overseas Filipinos, of course, and overseas Filipinos, as generally, as we all know, they see the country as an ideal investment location. So that's why economic growth is important for property investors. So let's check, how is the Philippines performing economically? A good measure, of course, as everyone would know to consider, is the country's GDP, gross domestic product. So in general, rising GDP signals a healthy economy. So when GDP grows, of course, employment grows as well. It typically grows as well. Um, Businesses expand, people have more income, right? That's the signal that GDP sends. And according to the Asian Development Bank, from 2021 to 2023, right? I did my homework, so you guys do your homework as well. So I'm gonna be I'm gonna be listing out some statistics here. The Philippines ranked among the top two in Southeast Asia for growth, for GDP growth, right? So to be more specific, in 2021, the growth of the Philippines was 5.7. In 2022, the GDP growth of the Philippines is 7.6. And in 2023, that's 5.5 growth. And in 2024, by the end of this year, it's forecasted that the Philippines would have grown its GDP by 6%. By 6%,
That's quite
right?
impressive.
It's very impressive. It's very impressive. How do we put this into perspective, right? Because maybe, oh my gosh, 6%, that's just one digit. It's low.
Mm.
Not necessarily. If we put this into an international perspective, the Philippines is actually on par with India. India,
Wow.
India, who has like what, 5 billion people? I don't know. There's so many people in India. So big. The economy
So
in it is so big.
India is also is a super fast growing economy. So it's
Yeah,
amazing that we're keeping up with India. Like India is one of those economies that it's trajecting like China was when China was still developing as well. And
there we
obviously we
go.
know what China's turned into now.
Exactly, right? An economic powerhouse. And actually, speaking of China, the Philippines is ahead of China forecasted this year, 2024, because China's only projected to grow 4.6%. So the Philippines is keeping up with the big boys. No, we're
Yeah.
becoming a big boy now. So yeah, in summary, the Philippines, in an economic growth perspective, of course, the Philippines is offering an appeal for property investors, right? Because it's backed by an expanding economy, statistically speaking, right? But it's not just this. It didn't happen because by magic, right? Of course, there's a specific reason why the Philippines has these numbers. And of course, it's because of its population. Right. And Georgina, why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think economic growth and population do kind of go hand in hand. The Philippines is actually considered to be a young country. And I don't mean in terms of like how long it's been a country. I mean that like the average age of a Filipino is 24, 25 years old. So we are, as a population, considered to be really, really young. And the rest of the world is not. We can say that a lot of major countries like the US, like the UK, South Korea, and Japan are facing what's called a boomer crisis. That means that
Mm,
a lot of their labor force is actually kind of aging out. They're really like they're ready to retire. There's not a lot of people who are wanting to work anymore. And the Philippines is the one who's stepping up to fill these gaps. So
mm,
our labor force is a really big driver of our economic growth. Filipinos are well known for being, kind and hospitable and very hard workers, and you're known as very ideal employees. So it's a huge boost for the Filipino economy to know that, like, all these countries with their aging population are looking here to fill those labor gaps. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with BPO companies. This is actually something that I learnt about when I first moved here to the Philippines, because I didn't know what a BPO company was. But for our listeners who aren't familiar, BPO is basically like I don't want to say a call center because it's not that simple, but it's
Right.
basically like an outsourcing company. BPO
Mm,
stands for business process outsourcing. So you guys have multinational companies who are getting their labor force
that's
here
right.
through BPO companies, and they do things like calls, they do customer support, but they also do things like administration, healthcare, insurance, marketing, even IT and tech support. So there's lots of different skill sets that are used in BPO companies, and there's BPO companies all around the world, of course, but it's really, really booming here in the Philippines. It's actually really, really impressive. The BPO sector is on track to hit nearly 38 billion pesos in revenue, and that's going to likely equal around 6 to 8% of the total GDP of the Philippines. You know, like you were mentioning before, Kane, GDP is a massive driver of growth in the Philippines. So for having one employment sector to equal, 6 to 8% of that
Of the total
growth is
GDP.
massive.
Absolutely. And you said 6 to 8%, right?
Yeah. So that's just for 2024, but looking forward, looking ahead, the BPO market is actually projected to skyrocket to a massive 310.56 billion pesos by 2030. So this industry is not
Wow.
going anywhere. It is obviously really beneficial for the Filipino economy. But something that comes to my mind when I hear these figures is, why are they coming to the Philippines? And
Yeah.
why will they continue to come to the Philippines? Because we don't want a job sector that's just going to fade away, that's
Yeah.
going to become less trendy. So, how do we know that this is actually sustainable? And this might not come as a shock to a lot of you, but mainly because labor here in the Philippines is quite cheap. Not
Yeah.
just the minimum wage here in the Philippines, but I'm talking about for the companies who actually outsource here through BPO companies, they pay less in taxes. So obviously it's really
I
beneficial
see.
for America, for Western countries to outsource their labor here in the Philippines. So they get, I guess it's good value for money, I suppose you could say. And like I said before, the Philippines is really, really well known for being hard workers. You guys are
Mm,
very dedicated to your job. So these people who are outsourcing through BPO, they're getting the best of both worlds. They're getting their hard
mm,
workers, they're getting them for cheap, and they're not sacrificing on quality or effectiveness. Like, it is really all a win-win situation, which is very exciting for a lot of, Western countries. Obviously, they love to hear that. Another thing as well is, obviously, the Philippines is a very big English speaking country. People might be surprised to know that Philippines actually has English as its second official language.
yeah.
So people are very, very fluent, and you'd be surprised to know that you've probably spoken to a Filipino if you've ever called a hotline, if you've ever called a company wanting assistance, if you've called your
Right.
bank, if you've called anybody, really. It's probably likely you've spoken to a Filipino and you might not have even noticed. You're very, very westernized in terms of your accent. It's very hard to pick unless you know what you're looking for. So people are engaging with Filipinos without even knowing it. And I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I heard about on the news. This is a couple months old, so I'm sure you've probably heard about it already.
Uh-huh.
But did you guys hear about the remote worker and the cashier? They were on an iPad at a fast food restaurant.
Yeah,
Well,
and the worker was in a province. It was a Filipino in the provinces
Yeah, they were
doing
just
actually,
zooming in.
oh my gosh, I'd never heard of this story. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, there was like a fried chicken or a fast food restaurant in New York City. And instead
Uh-huh.
of having like the self-serve checkouts that a lot of fast food restaurants do, they actually had a person like on an iPad. They were zooming in from a Filipino province, and you were talking to them and they were taking your order, and it was still
That's
getting
so
that
cool.
engagement, yeah, instead of feeling like you're just doing all the work yourself. And then that company was obviously benefiting from like that remote work setup in a very new and unusual way. But this is just another indication that, you know, remote work is here to stay.
Yeah,
Outsourcing through BPO companies is here to stay. It's not going to change anytime soon. So
for
yeah,
sure.
I want to make a point as well, especially with that, like the checkout person from the provinces. The thing is, because you know the US dollar in that example is so strong that if you pay a Filipino in the provinces, especially the minimum wage of the US, I mean, I wouldn't say rich, but they're doing very, very well here in the Philippines. So
yeah,
they're going to appreciate that a lot more than, say, an American on minimum wage. So
Mm,
that's why I think foreign companies love to hire here in the Philippines because we're like they appreciate it.
yeah, for sure,
Because
for sure.
if you get hired by an international company, generally you are going to get paid probably a whole lot
way
more than what
better,
the minimum wage
for
here
sure.
in the Philippines is, right? So that means that you're gonna try and do a better job because you appreciate getting paid that higher wage.
Right. And it's a growing trend. It's not just a one-time thing, especially during the COVID. Because what I noticed as well right now is that a lot of people are taking advantage of this remote work, especially amongst young people. Am I getting that right, Georgina?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really, really positive thing for Filipino workers. It's making quite a big impact in more ways than one. It's kind of like a domino effect, like you were talking about
Mm,
before, Kane. You know, GDP means a stronger economy, means people are spending more. In a very similar way, you know, people who are working remotely through BPO companies are getting these higher wages. It means that they can afford more homes. They're wanting to invest their country back into they're wanting to invest their money back into their home country. This is pushing real estate demand higher, you know, in areas like the capital of Manila, in BGC, in Makati. It means that more overseas Filipinos and even investors want to invest their money back here because of all these positive statistics that are telling them it's a growing country. And it's also a really good thing on the commercial side as well. You know, BPO companies are setting a trend that other multinational companies are going to copy. They're going to
mm,
want more office buildings. They're going to want more
yep.
commercial areas. It's just going to be that domino effect. It's going to build a stronger economy. It's going to increase property values. It's going to make it a more profitable investment. So I guess all of that is to say that the Philippines is really uniquely positioned as a
Mm.
labor force to fuel economic growth. And it's creating a ripple effect that's going to just mean positive things for everyone everywhere, really. It's really exciting.
Right. I just want to piggyback on what you said earlier. Number one, the Philippines is a booming economy with sustained growth, as we discussed about the GDP. So, for property investors, this means that there will be increased demand for housing, right? And offices and commercial properties, as you just mentioned, Georgina,
Mm.
which also means that there is very high chance, or it promises rather, high returns on investment, right? And then at the same time, because of industries like the BPO, most specifically about the BPO, there are higher wages for Filipinos, which means that Filipinos can afford more homes,
So
right?
not just the one that most people aim for, they can own multiple, which is really exciting.
Multiple homes, right? Exactly. And then, of course, the more stable the country is, the more overseas Filipinos and the more investors would want to invest in the Philippines.
Mm.
Technically summarizing, number one, the economic growth and the middle class and the labor force in the country. Very, very fascinating. Oh my gosh. I think I'm gonna invest already.
Yes.
Just kidding. Kidding. But yeah, I was just wondering as well. There's a question in my mind, which brings us to our next topic. So, what if the economy market grows? So what? So what if the demand grows? What specifically is its effect on the real estate market? Because we've been talking about wages, we've been talking about statistics, growth, GDP, and all of that. But specifically, how does it connect to the real estate market? And which, of course, brings us to our third reason in our episode. Is it worth buying property in the Philippines? And this is house appreciation. So, Justin, why don't you tell us about house appreciation in the country?
Well, let's start with, not everybody knows what house appreciation is. So, just a quick, it's essentially house appreciation is the value of the home increasing over time. So, meaning, if you bought a home for 100,000 and in 2 years, it increased to 150, dream home, right? But that is, that 50,000 increase is appreciation. And what's surprising is that Philippines really keeps up with the best of them. And I mean the best of them. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to narrow down and compare the Philippines overall again to make sure that you understand that not every location in the Philippines is going to appreciate like this. Some might be higher, some might be lower, right? And we're talking about other countries as well. Same principle apply it to. But if we look at the places that Filipinos tend to live in, the countries, you can see that Philippines is really up there with them. So,
Yep.
according to Global Property Guide, house prices in the Philippines have appreciated by 37.95% over the past 5 years. Now,
Mm,
let's compare that to some real estate heavyweights the Filipinos live in. United States being the number one at 53.70%, Australia next, 48.78%, UAE 49.3%, and Japan 39.88%. Now, the Philippines is holding up, like I said, at 37.9%, 5%. That's pretty impressive
yep.
because those countries that we talked about are first world countries and we
Mm,
are a developing country. So they have the unique advantage of their economy being already matured in a lot of ways. Now, you could also, but you could flip that argument, right? You could also say, hey, Philippines is doing really well because it's a developing market. Yes, so you could see it at both, but like the stats show that Philippines, from an appreciation point of view, is doing really well. So, and I want to touch on this because I think what happens is a lot of people apply one location to a country. And I think that's
mm,
what, because a lot of people think that Philippines houses don't appreciate, but
mm,
they clearly do. It just depends on where you're looking at. And if you see Philippines as a lens of just BGC, because BGC is the place where everyone's investing and everyone's looking and everyone's heard about, and you just look at the real estate market of the Philippines through the lens of BGC, you're probably going to think Philippines is a bad place to invest, of course, but you shouldn't. It's not just Philippines is not just made of just one place. There are a lot of places in the Philippines that appreciate over value, that are cash flow positive, that are in good investments. You just have to look and do your research, and you will find what you need here in the Philippines. Now, I just want to put some context around that as well, because, we talked about the countries that are above the Philippines, right? But there are
mm,
also countries where Filipinos live that are way below the Philippines. So the UK, for example, only appreciated 22.74%. Qatar was in the negatives at negative 10.52%. Hong Kong also in the negatives the past 5 years at minus 24.76%. So
mm.
again, Philippines is right in the middle of where other countries are. And I think that shows that Philippines has a lot of opportunity for growth. Before we move on, I want to preface that past performance does not guarantee future success, meaning, we're looking at this data and it's the past. So that doesn't, and what happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen again. So please take that into consideration. And also, like we said at the start, also take into consideration we're talking about Philippines as a whole and not the individual locations that the Philippines is made from.
Wow. So, just looking by the statistics and the numbers, the Philippines again are playing with the big boys, not just on GDP, but on growth, on house appreciation as well, and it's still developing. I mean, the countries that you mentioned were first world countries, and they were growing at that rate. But again, those markets in there are mostly matured, if not matured already, right? And the Philippines is mainly developing.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of for property investors. There's really a lot of opportunity in the country for sure. But again,
Definitely.
appreciation is one side of the coin in real estate investment returns. So that's just one side. That's just the value of the property. There's another side of the coin, which
Yes.
is cash flow, right? Which is cash flow, which brings us to our next topic, the rental yield in the Philippines, more specifically, high rental yield in the Philippines. So the big question is the Philippines a good spot for a cash flow positive properties? So first, let's discuss what a rental yield is for our viewers. So technically, everyone, rental yield is the annual return from renting out your property, right? So more specifically, this is mainly calculated by your annual rental income divided by your property price. That is your annual rental income divided by your property price. So this means that higher rental yields have better cash flow because it helps cover number one, your mortgage payments. So a lot of people use this as strategy to cover their mortgage payments. They rent out their new place, right? And then it also helps covers repairs, right? Maintenance. So there's a lot of things that there's a lot of expenses on buying property. It's not just a one-time thing. There's also a monthly thing beyond your mortgage, beyond your payments. But to put this again into perspective, a global perspective, international perspective, as we've been doing all this time, how does the Philippines compare to other countries? So, according to the Global Property Guide, here's the median gross rental yield. So, take for example, in the United Kingdom, the rental yield is 7.3%, 7.03%. In the United States, it is 6.10%. And in the Philippines, it's 5.36%. Again, big boys, watch out, you guys. So, and in Qatar, that is 5.61%. And in UAE, that is 5.27%. And in Canada, that is 5.10%. And in Australia, that is 4.98%. And in Singapore, that is 4.35%. And for Japan, that is 4.33%. And in Hong Kong, that is 3.52%. So again, the Philippines with 5.36%, it's beating out markets like in Australia, in Canada, in Singapore, in Japan, in Hong Kong, playing with the big boys, right?
Very
With
impressive.
Was
me as well.
surprised about that as well. I think, hearing those numbers, I'm sure a lot of people are surprised again because they probably, only think about the more popular places like, BGC and things like that and go, oh, but property in the Philippines, like cash flow isn't very good. Well, the numbers say different. Again, it
Right.
depends on who you're looking.
Right, exactly. And that's not bad if you're considering for an investment destination. 5.33%. I mean, a lot of people, personally speaking, if I didn't know about these statistics, I'd probably think investing in Japan would be good. I mean, like Japan, right? Anime and that kind of thing. I mean, Singapore, right? Smart people. Hong
Mm.
Kong, Disneyland, right? So
It's definitely those types of the countries give the impression of lots of
those,
growth
yeah,
because they're so
that
powerful
there's the
countries.
exactly first world
Yeah.
countries, and they have strong impression, generally speaking, on international audience. But again, just with property appreciation, these numbers are averages, right, for countries.
Mm.
So if you are an investor and you're looking to maximize your cash flow, again, you've got to dig deep, dive deeper, because some cities and some regions in the Philippines, they might offer higher yields for sure than the national average, but
Mm.
others could be lower. So
Yep.
again, it's all about doing your research and picking the right location, but that's just technically the national average. And one more thing to keep in mind, again, reiterate what Justin said earlier about house appreciation. Past data is a bit it's valuable, it's important, but it does not say what the future is. It's not a crystal ball, right? It's not a crystal ball for future performance. So the rental market can change based on factors like demand, based on factors like infrastructure developments, regulations, so many things, right? And it's very crucial to stay informed about the market trends to make the smartest investment decisions. But overall, right, just a key takeaway for our investors: 5.36% rental yield in the Philippines. It makes the country a strong option for people who would want to invest in properties, right? But again, just to reiterate one last time, these are national averages. Okay. Some regions of the Philippines might offer higher yields, some might fall below. But location research is the most important thing to do here to maximize return. So if cash flow is your priority, the Philippines is definitely worth exploring. And with rental yields over 5% in growing urban areas, and again, Philippines is still developing, so it might go higher, right? So the key here, find the right location to unlock the full potential of your investment. But yeah, since we're talking about the two sides, we've already talked about the two sides of real estate returns. That is in the house appreciation side and the cash flow side. But the question is, can they buy property in the Philippines? Which brings us to our next topic, the affordability of real estate properties in the Philippines. So, Georgina, why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about this one. So I was having a thought while you were talking, and that is
Mm-hmm.
that yes, where our rental yield is about 5%, right? But how much money are you putting up to buy these properties? What's the average price of a property in Singapore? What's the average price of a property in Australia, in the
Mm-hmm.
UK, in the US? It's considerably more expensive than in the Philippines. I am thinking to myself, yes, you're only getting, quote unquote, only getting 5% back in your rental yield, but the amount of money that you put up is considerably less. So some could argue that that's a better
Mm.
investment, but I will get back to that later. I did want to talk about the common misconception that people have that the Philippines is already unaffordable for real estate investors, and it's simply not true. People who say this are just repeating things that they've heard from their friends and family. They're focusing on high-priced areas like BGC, like Siargao, like other places that
Mm.
are already established. And yes, there are properties in these areas that are very expensive. They
Mm-hmm.
rival prices in LA, in London, or even in Sydney in pricing. But like we keep saying, you need to look granular. One property on one street is going to be priced differently to a property on literally the next street across. It can be a
Mm.
difference in millions of pesos. So like you don't just assume, oh, this entire area is out of my price range, because that is not the case.
Right.
The Philippines is a very large country. There's over 7,000 islands to choose from. There's lots of opportunities for growth still. There's many affordable locations with
Right.
lots of cash flow potential. So if you just do your research, if you just look and you look thoroughly, you are more than likely to find a place that is much cheaper in the
Yeah.
Philippines compared to wherever it is that you currently live, if you live internationally.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I've actually done a bit of research for you guys, and I wanted to explain, I wanted to share the actual price comparisons of properties in Metro Manila to
Mm-hmm.
other places around the world. Obviously, we have a lot of overseas Filipinos who are living in the US and the UK, etc. And I wanted to share with you guys just how far your money can go here in the Philippines. So let's compare some of the pricing of some studios and one-bedroom units here in the Philippines in some popular areas where you're likely to be looking if you were to buy. So in Quezon City, you'll be paying around 83,363 US dollars. In
Uh-huh.
Pasay City, 111,494. Paranaque City, it'll be 82,334. And even in Cebu, it's going to be around 89,687 US dollars. Cebu
Mm,
is not in the Metro Manila area. It's not generally the first place you would fly into if
mm,
you were traveling to the Philippines, but Cebu is a very popular tourist destination. It is a very
yep,
big city.
it is.
It's Am I right in kind of saying it's kind of like the second biggest city in the
Yeah,
Philippines?
yeah, generally,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a very beautiful place. Definitely recommend going there. But all that is to say, in comparison, these are cities in the Philippines, but in comparison to the rest of the world, look at LA, you're going to be paying $600,000. In Las Vegas, you're going to be paying around 300,000. In Dubai, it can range anywhere from nearly $400,000 to over $600,000. In Canada, in Toronto specifically, $427,000. In Sydney, it's going to be $639,000. And in Japan, it can be anywhere from nearly $200,000 to nearly $400,000. So this is what I was trying to get at before, in that, yes, the rental yield is only 5%, but the amount of money that it costs you is significantly lower. It is far more affordable here in the Philippines than in any of these major cities that we've spoken about. And
Yep.
that's not even talking about the less known areas, the
Mm,
areas that people don't really talk about. Pampanga, Clark, Davao. These locations offer really low entry prices, and they are still offering, relatively strong growth potential in
yep.
comparison. So all that to say is that the Philippines is a really good starting point if don't necessarily have enough money to afford real estate in your current country, or if you're
Mm,
not wanting to put up that much capital straight away, if you're just wanting to spend a little bit less on your first few properties, the Philippines is a really good place to consider. Especially with all the data that we've already spoken about. It's a fantastic market for real estate investment. It's really affordable. There's lots of opportunities for growth. And, the Philippines is so much more than just BGC. It's more than just Manila. There's, like I said, 7,000 islands to have a look at.
yeah.
So just do your research and you'll be more than likely to find a really, really good high potential property.
Sorry, I just want to piggyback on that point as well.
Mhm.
Investment is all, investment, especially if you're early on in your investment, is about risk mitigation. It's about risk mitigation because when it's your first or second, third property, like you're learning, and hopefully this content helps you to learn faster. And that's why we're creating this content. But, chances are you're probably going to make a mistake. And if you start with a cheaper investment, at the very least, that's not gonna affect you as much as, say, buying in, like you said, those more expensive areas where if you make a mistake, like in Australia, for example, I think this is why most investors in Australia really only buy 1 to 2 properties.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it's because if they make a mistake, it's a huge mistake on their portfolio, a huge mistake. But if you can get in at 80,000, 100,000 instead of 500,000, or if you're in Sydney, probably like a million plus, then at least you're mitigating your risks, and then it allows you to learn. And if you do make a mistake, you can recover from it quite quickly, because if you're looking at, you know, let's say $100,000 and you're buying a property here, you're probably paying, if you're buying from a accredited developer, you can get away with 10% down and then borrow the rest from the bank. That's 10,000. And then if you're looking for a secondary market, 20%, that's 20,000. So 10,000, 20,000. But if you're buying, a million, then that means that your down payment's 100,000. 200,000 if you're paying 20%. Like that's such a big difference. And that can make or break your ability to become rich through property.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot less risk here. There's a lot more wiggle room for you to try again if you happened to make a
Right,
mistake.
exactly. Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. There's a lot of room for mistakes,
Mm,
right? In case and maybe if you're starting out in real estate, the Philippines is a really good country to invest in. Again, because let's just case worst comes to worst scenario, right? There will be there's a loss. Probably something happened. The loss is not that high if you invested in the Philippines compared to the other countries, the first world countries that we just mentioned. I mean, it's not even half. In the United States, it's like $600, and the Philippines is what on average 80,000 to 100,000
Yeah.
dollars in. It's not even half, and it's not even a quarter. It's significant, right? So it's a really good option for risk mitigation. I definitely agree with that. And the price difference, it's crazy. It's
Mm.
just crazy. It's a really and again, based on statistics, it's growing, it's playing with the big boys, high cash flow, really, really good location and opportunity for real estate investors.
Mhm.
But yeah, not that's very interesting. And of course, the affordability is one of the biggest influences for investors in the housing market. But actually, there's one more thing that's equally interesting as well and equally important for the housing market, which brings us again to our next topic, which is the rapid infrastructure development in the country. Right. So, what is the importance of infrastructure? So, let's talk about one of the biggest drivers of property value, which is infrastructure. So, at its core, real estate and its value, this is about people. It's about people. It's about where people live. It's about where they work. It's about where they spend their time. So mainly that's what drives up property values, right? So we're talking about roads. We're talking about airports. We're talking about bridges. We're talking about anything really that transforms an area. So good infrastructure helps us move around faster. It helps people move around faster, and it connects people easily to major hubs. It improves quality of life. It makes it so convenient for everything, right? It's convenient to commute. It's convenient to enjoy leisure activities. So people are more likely to settle in those areas, right? And when people want to live in a specific area, the value of real estate goes up naturally, right?
Mhm.
Just by common sense. So, in fact, research shows that city suburbs with rail services often have better capital growth than those without. It just goes to show that the power of infrastructure on property values. So take for example the Metro Manila subway project here in the Philippines. So it's going to be the country's first ever underground railway system. So once this is completed, it'll drastically cut down travel times across Metro Manila. So just to put in perspective, and to be more specific, imagine traveling from Quezon City to Taguig in just maybe 10 minutes to 15 minutes. That's a miracle already for people living in the Philippines.
What does it take now? Like an hour?
Yeah, an hour,
Yeah.
generally speaking, on a really good day, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Really
On
good
a
day.
That's a really good day. Right? It's like everyone's, I don't know, probably everyone's watching Manny Pacquiao or a Miss Universe in their TVs. Then you can travel for 30 minutes from Quezon City to Taguig, right? But this subway, it's going to help out a lot, 10 to 15 minutes. So that it's going to be a game changer,
Mm,
especially for commuters, right? So it
absolutely.
enhances the appeal for living and working in these areas. And of course, let's not forget the new Manila International Airport in Bulacan. So this is a massive, massive project, and it's set to become one of the largest airports in Asia. So this is expected to boost tourism, create thousands of jobs, spur economic growth in the surrounding areas, more people visiting from other countries, and more people working, of course, means higher demand,
Mm,
right?
absolutely.
And of course, it's a domino effect. That's going to be higher demand for housing as well, which can significantly increase property values. And there's also another project going. There's a lot of projects in the Philippines, but just one last example: the Bataan Cavite interlink bridge. So this is soon to be one of the biggest or longest bridges in the world. So this is going to be a 32 kilometer marvel. This will connect the provinces of Bataan and Cavite, significantly reducing travel time and opening up new areas for development. So, but again, by making these regions available and accessible, we're encouraging people to explore and to live and to invest in these areas, in these places, which a lot of our audience, especially our international audience, they might not have considered before,
Mm.
right? I mean, generally, Bataan and Cavite are not necessarily tourist spots. I mean, you guys, have you ever been to these places?
I've definitely heard of them, but I don't think I've ever been. And I think a lot of that is because they're hard to get to, they're far away. I've I'm a bit nervous about traversing like public transport and things like that, especially when I don't speak the language. So it's harder for me to, want to go out on my own and explore. But I think knowing that the route is just like a straight bridge makes me feel a lot more confident about potentially going to see.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Justin?
So I have an interesting point actually on infrastructure and accessibility, right? So generally infrastructure is really good for a city, but what can actually happen is because living in the city is generally more expensive, the
Mm.
better infrastructure of the city or the if you make it easier for people to get into the city, what can happen is the areas around the city can increase in value because people go, well,
Mm.
why would I live in the city and I'm going to pay twice the amount when I can live outside the city and get into the city quite easily? So what infrastructure can do outside of increasing the property value of the city, it can also make it very interesting and increase the value of properties around that city because it's easier to get to now. So, take that
Right.
into consideration. And all these projects that the Philippines are creating are making it easier for people to get there. So if it's easier for people to get there, then more likely people are going to invest in that place.
Right. And also it's helping out the areas on those around the city, right? So outside the city, outside, more specifically in the Philippines, outside Metro Manila. I mean, Cavite and Bataan is outside Metro Manila. And take for example, when this infrastructure is completed, it's not just gonna help out Bataan and Cavite, but also the places surrounding that, right? So yeah, infrastructure is not just about roads and bridges. It's also enhancing people's lives,
Yeah, for sure.
right? So yeah, when we make it easier for people to live comfortably and give them access to what they need, and when we make people stay connected, right? We create communities where people want to be. So when people want to be somewhere, the property values tend to rise, right? So with so many projects underway, these developments don't just improve the daily life of Filipinos, they also enhance the value of properties, especially in the areas directly impacted by these projects. And as what Justin mentioned, the areas surrounded where these structures are built. So again, on a side note, for infrastructure is a fantastic way to it's a fantastic indicator or a fantastic signal that a place could turn into a hotspot, especially if it was hard to reach before. But we'll actually dive deeper into these identifying hotspots in our upcoming series. So
We
just to give you
will.
guys a teaser, right? Just a teaser. So we'll break down on how you can find the areas in the Philippines that might turn into the next BGC or Makati. But long story short, the Philippines is investing billions and billions of dollars, not just pesos, dollars in infrastructure all over the country. And that is a good sign. That is a really good sign for any property investor. So yeah, it makes them easier. These infrastructure, it makes it easier for Filipinos and for people in general to move around the Philippines, or even to get to the Philippines, right? For people outside the Philippines, and not only it does not only benefit those who live here in the country, but it also boosts tourism and it attracts overseas interest. So improve airports, better roads, transportation systems are getting better, making the country more accessible to international visitors and investors, increase tourism, so many things, so many things. So all of that, it all just means that it's going to improve the value and the Philippine real estate market for sure. But yeah, we'll actually dig deeper again. On a side note, we'll dig deeper onto finding these hotspots in our upcoming series. All right. But anyways, so since we're talking about improving people's lives, making these places better, we're reaching our next topic here, which is about lifestyle. So, Justin, why don't you tell us about lifestyle?
So, like infrastructure, lifestyle is also one of the strongest core drivers right now that is making things into a hotspot. So,
Mm,
think about this. Think about some of the most expensive places in the world: LA, Sydney, London, Vegas, Hawaii. What other places? Name some great lifestyle places. What do all these places have in common? They have lifestyle features that you can't find anywhere else in the world. So that's why, this is a big reason why I think people should look into investing in the Philippines, because really Philippines has such a diverse lifestyle. Like, you can
mm.
practically find anything that you want, beach. If you want to live in the jungle, you can live in the jungle. Like, you can find practically any type of lifestyle here in the Philippines. And again, like I said, that's such a big driver, especially because, ever since really after COVID, people have been realizing that they want to live in an area that can give them the lifestyle that they want. And then
Mm,
you add that with the fact that everybody can work from home, or a lot of people can work from home, so they're now choosing to value real estate markets that can give them the lifestyle that they want, whether it's, they want to live by the beach, they want to live in an area where there's great clubbing scene because maybe they're young,
mm,
maybe they're older and they want to be near a golf course. So they're valuing lifestyle, and really Philippines is a mecca of lifestyle. You can find anything that you want here in the Philippines. Let me give you an example of how lifestyle features impact real estate prices, right? So studies have shown property prices with strong lifestyle amenities. So we're talking about, great ocean view or beach properties, or strangely, if your property is near a golf course, or maybe that's not strange. If you think about golf courses, you think about like rich people, right? You think about people
I
with
think
time and people with
people like the
money.
view as well, just
Yes, and of course.
unimpeded.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the view is really good on a golf course. Like, it's green, right?
Yeah.
And those prices typically can go for a premium, and studies show that they can go 60 to 80% higher than
wow.
places without. And again, if you think about those places, LA, Hawaii, London, Sydney, especially Sydney, like if you're thinking Bondi,
Mm.
please look that up, because like if you're buying in Sydney and you can see the ocean, it's probably gonna be like millions just because you
Okay.
can see the ocean. And I show that example because that kind of shows how important lifestyle is now when thinking about the value of real estate. And again, Philippines has it all. So beaches, city, jungle, nature, you name it, we have it. And I think that's a very great advantage that Philippines has. And the only difference between, the places that I mentioned and the Philippines is that we're, the stigma that we're still a third world country. But I think we are a developing country now, not a third world country. And I think that
Mm,
stigma is starting to go away. So that is a huge advantage of anybody looking to buy in the Philippines. Think about the lifestyle they can give to your tenants and how important that is now in a world where, especially the younger people, they're prioritizing their life over their work. and they
Mm.
can work anywhere. So why wouldn't they live in the Philippines if that's the case?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So actually, just to piggyback on what you were saying earlier, Justin, the Philippines is in my opinion, it's no longer third; it's developing. More specifically, into becoming a first world country, which brings us to our last topic. Oh, I enjoyed this first episode so much. I don't want it to end, but I don't want our viewers to get bored. But again, our last topic, the Philippines going to from a third world country to into the first world. So, Georgina, why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, I just want to preface this by saying that we are aware that the phrase third world country is kind of a controversial phrase. It's very insulting to a lot of countries to use it,
Yeah.
actually. It's not technically the politically correct term, but we kind of don't know how else to phrase it because it is just the perception that the world has that the Philippines is a third world country, it is a poor country, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. We are
Mm,
definitely turning into something. We are going through a very big period of growth. So
yes.
yeah, the phrase developing country is kind of the best that we have right now.
Yes.
And
Agree.
until we get a better phrase, we will just keep using it. But we are aware that it's a controversial kind of phrase. That all that is to say that even though we are still developing, there's already so many opportunities for investors to get in early. Everybody kind of wishes they invested in real estate 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? Like
Yeah.
our parents were able to buy houses and yet we're not. So if only we were born earlier, we could afford a house. But that's not necessarily the case here in the Philippines because it's cheap to buy now because there is development happening soon. I guess this is better phrased with an example, right? So let's take BGC as an example. 20 years ago, BGC was very, very affordable. It used to be, just a flat block of land. It was pretty much just dirt. There wasn't very much around. And
Yeah.
yet nowadays, BGC is a metropolitan city. It is massive. It's one of the most expensive places in the Philippines. So people
Mm,
who invested in BGC 20 years ago likely scored one of the best deals of their lives. They are
right.
rich, they are millionaires now, they are loving life.
For
That
sure.
if you think about the Philippines now as a whole, where we are, there's lots of room for development. If you are thinking about us as a developing country, our country is on the rise, and there's lots of similar opportunities now that there was 20 years ago for BGC. So even though we say that BGC feels expensive, we can compare that to first world countries. And, by comparison, BGC is still relatively affordable. If you think about major cities like Sydney, like New York, like London, these properties are going to cost you $1 million minimum.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
BGC isn't going to cost you $1 million. Maybe one or two properties might, but it's unlikely that they actually would.
Right. And yeah, Justin, go ahead.
So I want to piggyback on BGC as well. I think that in 30, 50 years time from now, people are going to look back at the property prices of what BGC is right now and go, I wish I bought in BGC. And
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying, and don't get me wrong, so don't take me the wrong way. I'm not saying that you should invest in BGC because BGC probably isn't a great investment opportunity at the moment based on what's happening there. And again, it depends on your portfolio, right? So
Right.
I want to make a side point is that investment is not black and white. It's very contextual, meaning if you hear something even from us and, we're great, um, according to us, we're great according to us, always understand it from the context of your own investment strategy and portfolio.
Yes.
Because even though I say BGC isn't necessarily a great place to invest, I mean, if you have really good foundational properties already and you're buying BGC because you understand that the appreciation is pretty steady and it's a
Mm,
very steady property, then it might
yeah.
be a good investment for you. So
Mm,
again, always when you hear advice, always put it through the lens of your own situation, your own finances. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because we're a developing country, by the time that we are a first world country like Australia, like the States, like the UK, the places that are very expensive now are going to be even more expensive later. And that goes the same for the places that are cheap now are going to be expensive later.
Mm,
Like the Philippines
mm,
will be eventually like just like Australia and the US, where it's extremely expensive, where the average person can't afford a property. That's why you should probably get in early if you can.
mm,
Definitely. I was just about to say the same thing, like with real estate, definitely the earlier you get in, the better. Real estate is always about those long-term gains. And
mm.
like we keep saying, you do need to do what's best for you. This is just general, only we're looking at the whole country. We're not looking at a specific area. And we keep on saying as well that, past performance is not indicative of future performance. So like this is all theory, but, the data shows that the Philippines is going through a really big growth period. So we do believe that the Philippines is probably primed for investment right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you right now. But in saying that, we know that the Philippines is primed for development right now because this is exactly what we've learned from other countries around the world.
Mm.
Like the UK used to be a lot cheaper than it is now. The US used to be a lot cheaper than it is now. Dubai used to be a lot cheaper. Housing today has just become so expensive that home ownership is nearly impossible for your average earner. The
Yep.
idea that a single person can buy a house on a single income in Australia is impossible. Like you would need to win the lottery in order to buy your own house by yourself. At minimum, you need two incomes in order
Yep.
to afford a home. And it's very, very likely that the Philippines could reach a similar point. People who buy now are going to benefit in 5, 10, 20 years when the market matures and prices keep on climbing.
I want to piggyback on that point because that's where the money is to be made. The money is made in real estate between that transition point, that buying window, that when it starts from here and the peak is here and you bought right here. Not buying right here because here this is where you lose money, right? When it's already peaked. Again, a good example is BGC. Like if you bought in BGC here or early here, then you're making money. But if you're buying BGC now, where it's up here already, too high in the camera, here, right here, then you're probably not making as much money. And so we see that. I think our main point before we move on to finishing this video, our main point is that the Philippines is probably still here and has so much room to grow. And if you're one of those people that are smart enough to buy here versus here, then you're probably going to have assets that you can give to your next generation kids.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And also, I want to add something to that. I just want everyone to know, right? Because we've been mentioning BGC a lot, and a lot of our audience might not know what BGC is. So technically, BGC is Bonifacio Global City. It's a city within a city here in the Philippines. It's technically our New York. It's our Times Square. It's our Dubai, right? So just go ahead, go to Google right now, type BGC. The only thing that you're going to see there is a city in the Philippines. Okay.
I think that's about all I have to say really is that if you are going to invest, now is probably the best time. Like Justin said, you don't want to miss your window. Not to say that investing later is a bad idea. It just means if you are opportunistic, this is probably, if you want to get in early, now's
Mm,
probably the time.
absolutely. Now is the time. I definitely agree. Now is the right time to do it. It's very, very early still to enter the market in the Philippines, which is a good time to enter the market. You don't want to enter the market too late, right? And again, Philippines is developing so many project infrastructure, the lifestyle, the numbers show the GDP, the working people, BPOs are showing that the Philippine economy is growing. So the best time to invest is now, right? But then again, that concludes this podcast. But yeah, the question here is: should property investors invest in the Philippines? That is the big question. And the answer is it depends on you.
It always depends.
It always depends on you. Why are we saying that? We know that we just discussed all these statistics and all these numbers and the lifestyle and all these projects, but we can't give you a black and white answer because everything is contextual, right? Everything is contextual. So it depends on what your portfolio needs. But then again, there's no such thing as a bad asset. There is no such thing as a bad asset, only bad asset selection. So it comes down to what you're looking for and what's right for your strategy and your investment portfolio. So whether the Philippines is a good investment opportunity for you lies within those questions. But
Definitely.
yeah, for
Definitely.
sure.
If you think that you're looking for a cash flow positive property, if you're looking for a property that's going to appreciate in value, and if you're looking for a property that's relatively cheap to start with, Philippines might be for you. But then again, it might not be. That might not be what you want.
But probably the most definitive thing we can say to that question is if you look hard enough, you can find a cash flow positive house. You can
Yes.
also find a house that appreciates a lot. And
Yeah.
you can also find both, like a house that does
Yes.
both, or like the dream scenario. Sorry, the dream scenario is that it's cash flow positive, like high yielding,
Mm,
high growth, and also just a third one to think about is that you can add value to it, so you can get some short term growth. But add value, I mean something like a renovation, like renovating kitchen or making an
right.
improvement.
Mm,
Because if you get all three, then you appreciate long term, it's cash flow positive, and then if it is stagnant, you can inject some value into it by doing a renovation. So that the most definitive thing we can say is if you look hard enough, you can find what you need in the Philippines, depending on what your portfolio needs at the time.
yes. And just to add on that, just technically what Justin has been saying, the Philippines can be a great opportunity for you if you're looking for number one, cash flow, and number two, property appreciation. Okay. So just to have a little bit of a recap, is the Philippines better compared to mature markets? So again, cheaper places to start than before were in Los Angeles, Sydney, London, Tokyo, Dubai, Toronto, right? But these markets are already saturated, so it has fewer opportunities now to invest there because prices are extremely high. But in the Philippines, since it's still growing, it means that there's more room for entry, for affordable entry, and there's so much greater potential for growth and returns. So the Philippines offers opportunities for all goals. For all goals. So no matter what your focus is, whether it's cash flow, appreciation, or both, these properties here, they can meet your needs. So the key, again, is to look hard enough and identify those right areas for your goals. Yeah, but technically, that is the conclusion of this podcast. But just to give a preview to our audience, we're going to be having our next series or our upcoming series called Finding the Next Hotspots. So the next big thing is finding a hotspot, the next BGC, the next Siargao, the next Boracay, before it became a tourist haven. So that's exactly what we're going to cover on our next series. So make sure to subscribe to our channel.
I
Georgina?
also think, yeah, now's a really good time to plug our real estate community. If you're serious about real estate, if you're just interested in learning, definitely join our group. There'll be a link down below in the description for you. You're going to get access to exclusive resources that will help you make smarter investment decisions, and you'll be surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are also striving for wealth and financial freedom. You can talk to them. You can even talk to us. You can ask us questions, and you can let us know what you like and what you don't like about our videos, and maybe we'll make a video about your questions as well.
And last thing before we end it, if you are a enthusiastic property investor and you're like, wow, I want to start investing in the Philippines today, the first step, I think, and a great first step for anybody is understand your budget. And if you want to do that, it's quite hard to do that here in the Philippines, unfortunately. If you go to a bank, they'll only give you a rough estimate. They won't go through your details in length. where we will, with our free borrowing power consultation. So you can sign up and we will go through your finances and we will give you a better estimate, in our opinion, than anywhere else. We'll also let you know which banks potentially will lend you the money to invest in, as well as connect you with credible real estate agents who can work with you to find the property that you want to invest in. So that is completely free. We have a link in our description if you want to sign up and take advantage of that, which I think any property investor that wants to start today should.
All right. But yeah, do not forget, okay? Number one, to subscribe to our channel, right? And number two, join our community. Talk to us. You can talk to me, to Justin, to Gina, whatever you want to talk about properties and investing in the Philippines. And lastly, sign up for a free borrowing power consulting. It's for free. Why wouldn't you want to do something for free? It's already free, right? But yeah, that concludes our podcast. So whether the Philippines is the right investment for you, it depends on your strategy. But with its growth potential, it's definitely worth exploring. That is all we have for you. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Goodbye. Paalam, everyone, and see you in our next session. Bye.
Bye.